Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of First Things First. I'm Alistair McIntosh from the Housing Quality Network. What a week last week was, very intense. The Grenfell inquiry was the focus of Dominic Lawson's centrepiece column in the Sunday Times. He was drawing attention to the way in which some of the companies involved are allegedly faking the fire safety tests. Powerful, hard-hitting column, you must read it. In the same paper, there is also an article about a bill being introduced in Scotland which will control private rents and restrict them to no more than inflation plus 1%. So all happening in housing last week. More locally, in the part of London where I live, the local paper, the Camden New Journal, which I'll just get off the shelf for a second, had a story about the Chalcots. The Chalcots are a series of tower blocks in Fellows Road. They had cladding on them. The cladding was removed in 2017 and people were evacuated. So they've been through the mill. And what we did was send our outside broadcast unit up to Fellows Road. It's an interesting street. One side, Victorian mansions, if you like. The other side, towers with some private housing interspersed. Let's see what our man on the spot, Helmut Hare, discovered when he visited. Hello everyone, this is HQN's outside broadcasting unit and I'm in North London. What have I seen? What do you want to talk about? Let's go. When I first worked for Camden, this house, which looks magnificent today, was terrible. Split into bedsits, dangerous gas heaters and shared toilets. This explains why council housing was built in the first place. And here is some of that council housing. Self-contained flats, been in many of them, magnificent. We'll talk about them in more detail in a second. This is the boundary between the council estate, although many people have exercised the right to buy, so what does that mean today? And the private houses. Perfectly normal, routine sort of barrier you'd put in between any neighbours. Bear that in mind when we go forward. These blocks in the Chalcot estate have been subject to a wrangle between the council and the residents over cladding. Here's the last bit of cladding on Bray, a block I've been to many times to visit friends. Let's just see what greets you as you come out of your front door from Bray. Let's get a little bit closer to that sign to see what it actually says. Yes, someone has cemented broken glass into the top of the wall. Is this stigma in Britain today? We'll talk about that when we get back to the studio. I have no idea why that wall was built, but I tell you something, I've seen it before. I went to school in a large local authority estate on the outskirts of Glasgow called Penlee. It was next to one of the more prosperous suburbs of Paisley. Now, Glasgow at that time had a fearsome reputation. Football hooliganism, strikes. We basically invented sociology. Although when you look closely, the most famous industrial dispute was actually a work-in at a shipyard where we proved we could run a yard more effectively than top management. And the most infamous outbreak of football hooliganism was a pitched battle when the Rangers support defeated Franco's goons, something the International Brigade failed to do. But actually, Penlee was an outstanding school. You switch on the television in Scotland, who's the newscaster? A person from Penlee. Who put the computers into Concord? One of us. Built hospitals in Bahrain? One of us. Professional footballers? Sadly not me. So actually, Ralston and Paisley lost out by not looking across the border and seeing the good in that housing estate. And by the same token, Paisley isn't all bad. I mean, they built that wall and they didn't let their buses pick us up. Such was their fear of our dreadful reputation. But Paisley did give us Andrew Neil, who Boris Johnson is terrified of and won't appear in his programme, gave us Archie Gemmill, the scorer of the best ever goal in a World Cup, and also Jerry Rafferty, the one and only reason to think next year will be better. And of course, that's not the first wall that was ever built. What about Hadrian's Wall? No expense spared on the props here. Just think, if the Italians hadn't built that wall, they would have had first dibs on the steam engine, the bicycle, television, the telephone, fried Mars bars, you name it. And looking at the question more widely, the Italians aren't all bad, are they? They gave us gods like Lorenzo Amoruso and Gennaro Gattuso, not to mention a couple of painters and decorators. I mean, Michelangelo would be welcome in any direct labour organisation across the country. And just think, if the English government had crossed over that wall and taken the Scottish fire regulations, certain events might never have happened. And still in the world today, we've got more people arguing for boundaries and walls and division. It's time for the spirit of Christmas. It's time to come together. The last stage of Helmut Hare's tour around London finished in Portobello Road. It's near the foot of Grenfell Tower, and he looked at the Salvation Army carol service. Let's not forget, the Salvation Army fed the emergency services on the night of Grenfell. It's a somewhat diminished carol service because of the COVID restrictions. The market's quieter than it used to be without all the tourists thronging around. But in the midst of that, they keep going. And that is the spirit we need now and in the future. I'm not asking you to agree with the Salvation Army. I just think we need to match their indomitable spirit. Thank you, and I'll see you next week. Thank you.